Hello and welcome. My name is Marin Sakri. I run demand generation for Evolv Technologies. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen in. This is our 6th virtual panel in the Think CX Digital Leaders Tell All. Today we're focusing on catalyzing your digital transformation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please ask those in the area below in the Zoom, and we will cover those questions at the end. For those of you that may be triple tasking, we'll also distribute the recording at the end. So now to our panelists. We have on the line with us today, Ning. She leads digital optimization at Verizon Wireless, where her focus is on achieving rapid growth through AI, data, customer experience, optimization, and personalization. She has spent more than a decade at top digital agencies such as LBI, Razorfish, and delivered big growth through excellent customer experience from top-tier brands such as American Express, McKinsey, Ford, TD Bank, BBVA, Nielsen, MasterCard, and AT&T. Quite a roster there, Ning. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. One thing I do wanted to make you all aware is I'm here not representing Verizon. I'm here just to share with my peers my experience and my personal point of view about everything digital optimization and digital transformation.
Thanks for joining us. We also have with us Milton Pappas. He is also no stranger to digital transformation, having worked as a Chief Digital Officer for RetailWinds, the SVP of Digital Marketing and CMO of Hudson's Bay, and in a variety of other retail leadership roles. Milton is currently an advisor for TopLooks.ai, an AI solution that helps online fashion retailers create shoppable looks and bespoke advertising campaigns based on trending fashions. Milton's passions include creating truly personalized, digitalized experiences and hiring the right people to create a culture of innovation. Thanks for joining us, Milton.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Mary. It's nice to be here.
And our moderator for today's panel is Michael Scharff. Michael is the CEO of Evolv, which helps companies perfect the customer experience through continuous experimentation and optimization powered by machine learning. Michael brings over 2 decades of digital commerce and retail experience to the table, having held leadership roles at some of the most well-known retailers in North America, including Sears, Canada, Toys R Us, Staples, and Best Buy. Outside of Evolv, Michael serves as an advisor to a number of retail-related technology companies, including Shopkick, Retail Next, Rubik Cloud, and others, and invests in several startups. Thanks for joining us, Michael, and I will pass it over to you to kick us off.
Thanks, Marin, and thanks, Ning and Milton, for joining us today. I'm really excited about our 6th in the series of discussions. Today, we're going to be talking about digital transformation, personalization and experimentation, and innovation and supporting programs. So to kick things off, can each of you define what digital transformation or digital optimization means to you in 30 seconds? Ning, why don't you go first?
Thank you. I would say, let's just try to keep it simple, right? For digital optimization, in my mind, it's really using technology to find the best customer experience you can digitally, and in turn, make the brand and the business as profitable, as successful as you can.
Great. And Milton?
And I would agree with Ning. I think there's really 2 aspects to it from my perspective. There's obviously the technology, and that's whether you're leveraging technology to drive your online business, to drive your overall enterprise sales, to improve the customer experience. Technology is an enabler. And then I think there is the cultural perspective of digital transformation. As organizations, as digital becomes a bigger part of the overall mix from a sales perspective, from a customer, enablement, quote unquote, perspective, then it's really about culturally, how am I thinking differently? Am I thinking digital first? Am I thinking customer first, most importantly?
Yeah, that's great. So I was just thinking, what are some of the questions companies have to ask themselves as they kind of begin this path of digital transformation? And, how do they define when they're going to be successful? What are they trying to achieve, and how do they know when they've gotten there? Milton, why don't you kind of expand upon that a little bit?
So, Michael, it's a great question, and it's something that, as a retailer, you're always kind of thinking about sort of what's the path here. And I think it really first starts with the customer, right? At the end of the day, you really need to understand who your customer is, because where are they on their digital journey? if you have a customer that's not very tech savvy and you build the most incredibly tech savvy platform, very tech forward platform, then I'm not sure that you're going to get a lot of enablement and usage and customer satisfaction out of that. So start with the customer, understand who the customer is and where they are in the digital journey. Then it's really important to kind of map out your customer journey. How does the customer interact with you? How do they shop with you? 70+% of brick and mortar sales now are all researched online. Customers really start that purchase journey, that shopping journey online. And then whether they transact online, on your website or in a store, on your mobile device, it's really important to kind of map out that journey and really understand where the pain points are, the friction points, and the opportunity to reduce friction and improve the customer experience.
That's great. Ning, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I agree with everything Milton just said, right? I think customer focus is so important. I would say, a while ago, people talk about experience economy, right? So it's very much in its full glory at this point, right? Like the only way you can be successful is to provide the best customer experience. Bring everything else together, but making sure you deliver the delightful, impactful, relevant experience to your customer. So I want to touch upon a little bit about, sort of the other angle I think about this, right? When the company in the beginning of a digital transformation journey, right, is what I call potential, right? So how is it different, between digital versus what we had in the past, right? I feel like if we kind of really take a deep look into the potential digital brings to the table. And one thing I always think about is, the biggest potential here, I think, right, is something like this. In the past, we have to do study for months and years to figure out what's the demand. Then we have to plan for months and years to figure out what's the supply. Then we have to figure out how to bring these two together. Digital completely changed that, right? It allows you in real time to understand the demand right now, something you didn't know before, but you know right now. And also because technology allows you to change the supply to meet the demand right now as well. So that real time, I would say, convergence of demand supply is this enormous potential digital brings to the table. So I think it would be great for the company, right? Not only think about customer centric, but to think about how you can tap into that. I think it really challenges you in terms of how you plan for the business. And also, most importantly, I always feel like it can't emphasize enough, right? How do you operate? How do you structure yourself so you can operate in that mode that will allow you to tap into that incredible potential digital brings to the table? If you look at all the successful digital first companies, you name it, right? Amazon, you name it, Netflix, right? Google, everyone, Facebook, right? All of it. And their ability to be able to tap into that, I think it sits in the core of why they become so successful so quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I think that cultural orientation around the customer and around innovation and transformation is really critical. And I think, you kind of look back over the history of retail, any big change requires a really big focus on bringing the organization and all the people along to help drive that change. It takes, a serious focus from leadership to enable people to be innovative. And digital is probably the most broad-reaching example of that in the history of retail, because it affects everything everybody does across every part of the organization. So
yeah, and exactly. And this innovation never stops, right? Because digital is ever evolving, right? Like every how many seconds something else pops up. So it really turns the whole conversation, what you do, into I would say, ever evolving challenge, and definitely with lots of dynamics and lots of excitement.
Yeah, the other thing it does is it requires the breaking down of barriers between teams, because no longer can teams like merchandising and marketing and stores operate in silos. They really have to work cross-functionally and collaboratively. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how does digital transformation require and enable new forms of collaboration, and why is it so critical?
Yeah, I think it goes back to this whole change in real time, right? Data-driven, technology-driven. I think it changes everything because, right, instead of operating in a more linear fashion, right, start with the data people doing market research and go to the business planners and then go to operations people, go to technology. That's how we used to operate, right? We simply can't do that anymore. Real time, what does it mean? You kind of have to bring everyone together. Being able to look at the data, look at the business, look at the customer, look at the design, look at the technology, why. The conversation on its own changes the solution you will develop changes the product you will put forward. And if you don't do that, do a linear fashion, it's almost impossible for you to meet that real-time demand to be able to tap into that potential. So instantly, you're looking at yourself going from, imagine assembly line, right, to a roundtable discussion at all times with all the experts sitting there at the same time with you. How do you work that, right? How do you bring the synergy between the engineers versus data scientists, with a business person, versus project manager, versus a creative designer? They're all very different. The best way you can do that to get the most from them is to advocate for that, I'll call flat collaboration. Literally, it's a roundtable discussion. Nobody's more important than the other. Everyone gets to hear it. Everyone gets to contribute. They get to add on top of each other, right? I think that kind of changes it in a big way. Secondly, I would say is what I thought about is the speed, right? We've seen this so many times. If you have a great insight, by the time you get to a designer and there's constraints or opportunities, you lose it. And so you have to go back and do it again. So without a roundtable collaboration, your turnaround time is inevitably longer and the results won't be as good. So I think those are the two things I think quite a bit in terms of how do we operate, how do we support that.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think, the democratization of data and that customer insight is really critical to success across an organization nowadays. So Milton, what have some of your big experiences been around this?
So I think a couple of things, Michael. As you know, historically, organizations have changed org structures, evolved structures of the team. Everyone has been trying to figure out what's the right org structure to support digital. How do we get stuff done? How do we not work in silos anymore, right? Because initially it was digital over here, stores over here, and eventually sometimes people would cross over the line and actually talk to one another, right? So I think, most importantly, number one, you have to have an end game. You have to really all collectively understand sort of what is the KPI that I'm working towards. Am I driving overall sales? And to Ning's point, what is the data that's going to support that? How am I going to be able to look at that data to see where I need to pivot? Where am I succeeding, et cetera? Number two, again, it's the customer. And as we've talked about, Michael, there are organizational structures now that are centered around the customer journey. It is really, especially in retail, first and foremost, you got to satisfy the customer, right? And the customer has many different touch points with you, whether he or she is transacting online, whether they're in a store, and their expectation now is that you're going to, quote unquote, remember, you're going to have that personalized experience. And if I start a transaction with you here, when I go into the store, I want you to know that I'm a reward customer. I want you to know that I spend $1,000 a year with you. So it really gets back to really focused on key metrics, focused on the customer, and obviously organizational structure has evolved a lot over the years too.
Yeah, I've worked obviously with a lot of really big companies going through digital transformation over the past 20 years. And I've also worked with a lot of startups. And, one of the questions that I've gotten asked a lot when I've done consulting is, what's the right org structure for a retailer, trying to be best at this? And the answer is there is no right org structure. What's important is not the structure, but it's the culture and the orientation around the customer. Any org structure can work as long as the right leadership and incentives are in place, and the right culture to actually focus on collaborating to serve the customer.
So I think it's so well said, Michael. I'm so glad you said that. Actually, I haven't heard a lot of that, and I'm so glad you're thinking that way. It is so true, right? Because oftentimes, especially in the company so big, Verizon, you can imagine how often we talk about structure and process because we have so many people who have to figure out how to make it work, right? I think you're absolutely right. In the core of it is doesn't matter what we do, we have to advocate for collaboration. We have to advocate for the right culture, the right leadership, and then it works.
Yeah.
In the end of the day, if you focus on that, the actual mechanics of the structure and organizing chart almost seem like not as important. Not because they're not important, they're really important, right? But under comparison, right? I think the end goal has to be clear. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Changing the org structure will not fix a company if you have underlying challenges around customer orientation and culture.
Exactly.
And if I could add just one more thing, Michael, I think, to Ning's point about goals are super important, right? I mean, historically, and we worked together at Toys R Us for a while. Initially, Organizations had separate goals for e-commerce, separate goals for stores. So and over the years, organizations have evolved, and you now have one common set of goals. And that really ultimately removes a lot of barriers, a lot of friction, getting people aligned on the same page when my goals are the same as yours, and I focus on the customer in the stores versus you focusing on the online experience.
Yeah, the transition from kind of the late 90s view of the world, which was e-commerce was going to eat retail, to it's all retail. We just have to serve the customers across multiple channels the way they want to be served, and how they integrate was, I think a big aha for a lot of people. I think back then there was definitely a view that the entire world was going to move online, and that was going to be the end of retail as we know it. And ironically, now we're actually seeing a pretty accelerated pivot in that direction. But again, it's not going to mean the end of physical retail for sure. Yes. So Ning, you when you joined Verizon, what did you find there in the testing and experimentation platforms? And then, what was your journey to understanding how you needed to kind of change the focus from traditional A/B testing to a more innovative approach to serve customers?
Yeah, it has been a very interesting, exhilarating experience for sure, right? I would say I've done this for a long time, but I think Verizon definitely pushes me to a whole different place, right? Which I welcome that, because I think it's very exciting to help a legendary brand like Verizon, a Fortune 19 company, right, to figure out how to do this. I think fundamentally, I always firmly believed digital experimentation is an essential part of digital operation in the modern days, right? I feel like I don't really honestly care who you are, what kind of company you are. I think if you are not operating in the fashion, like experiment-centric, right? Always trying things, always going to market to see how can you be informed by the customers, what they want, how they react to the product and service marketing, right? You are not going to be as successful. Again, goes back to the digital potential, right? How can you meet that demand in real time? What's the best way you can do that? Try it, show them, and then based on their feedback, can change it, right? And to me, that's just a no-brainer. So when I started with Verizon, what I realized is that we didn't really have, I would say, the basic setup. Right. I think before me, there was some ideas about maybe we should try something like this and try it maybe once or twice, but we didn't have a team. We didn't have a process. We didn't have a basic operation around it. Right. And there's people running certain experience once in a while, but I would say by no means it was established operation or practice. With that said, right, the first, once I realized that, right, the next question became huge for me is, so then what, right? It seems to me immediately you have a choice to make. Since we're kind of starting from scratch anyway, right, ground zero, like how do you do this? Do I start with building a mainstream operation like the one you've seen everywhere else, right? American Express has one, AT&T has one, everyone has one, right? There's mainstream solutions to that. Do I do that? Or do I do something else? And I felt like it was smart of us to ask ourselves that question before we just dived in and started just do stuff, right? We took a step back, right? And we thought about it. I would say in a time where I was sort of made bold, right? It's a very, very big company. Actually, it's the biggest company I ever worked for. How do you go bold with a company this size? It doesn't have this practice. You're doing from scratch, right? The implications of trying to transform seems to be overwhelming just to think about it. But then if you really give yourself like a moment to like a ponder on that, right? Think about, okay, that sounds scary, but what are the benefits, right? I think one thing kind of stuck with me is how long would that take for me to build roads in a plane that has nothing, right? Versus how long would it take for me to build airports? I can start to operate pretty quickly. I think it's made me realize, no, we absolutely should not go with a traditional route here. We should drop this whole idea. Let's build from scratch, let's do mainstream, and then let's get there. It's going to take way too long. As painful as it may sound, for a company this size to turn around, I don't believe a huge turnaround from a digital transformation perspective, it's a good thing. I think if you want to change, you want to change. So we decided to go bold. We decided to leap forward, right? And the line is forget about A/B testing, which was very controversial. It's like, what are you talking about? Of course you're going to do A/B testing. No, forget about that. Why? Because we realized technology has moved on. there's so many tools and capabilities in the market introduced already, we will be able to find what works for the business very quickly if we are smart about utilizing technology, especially artificial intelligence. So we decided to go for that, go for the latest technology and build our operation, build our plans around that. So that's one big decision we made. This is where we met Evolv. And they're different, they're new. They do all the traditional A/B testing, multivariate testing, but they have something very niche. And in my view, right, as of today, I still believe that, right? They have this approach to use AI to do, I call A/B testing on steroids. And they were able to help us to find what works quicker. What does that mean, right? That means not only we're experimenting, we're learning, we're able to impact the business quicker. So instantly, right, our practice is no longer just a nice to have tool for the company. We're not just learning to inform everybody else. We're literally in real time impacting digital growth, right? And results is astounding. It's actually unbelievable how well you worked. I have to be honest with you guys, right? I was pleasantly surprised. It tells you, right, the opportunities out there. It tells you the potential you can get if you're willing to try, if you're willing to embrace the power is invented by the market already, right? And then most importantly, right, go back to Michael and Milton was talking about earlier, right? It's all about customer, right? This kind of experimentation allows us to be so close with our customers to really meet where they want to be met. And because we're able to do that, we're seeing NPS going up, we're seeing digital growth going up, we're seeing profitability, we're seeing digital orders. So it's been fascinating. It's been a good journey. It's been a good ride.
Yeah, congratulations. Those are some amazing results, and we were certainly happy to be there to help you out. One of the things you said that really resonated with me was this, kind of pace of experimentation and the willingness to try a huge number of things to figure out what works, and also recognizing that what works for one customer may not work for the next customer, and the need to be really creative and nimble. And I think when you look at digitally native companies, at their heart, companies like Booking.com, like Amazon.com and Netflix, they really started with a foundation of experimentation and innovation at their core.
Yes.
To solve a customer need. And that requires not only different technology, but also a really different mindset about the expectation that not everything you do is going to work. You're going to fail on the way, but if in aggregate you're building the business and you're growing, that's really what the goal is.
Yeah. It goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, right? Like, how you operate in this brave new world is critical, right? And the mindset is critical. And I think, we are all very smart, and I'm sure the research department is very smart, data department is very smart, designers very smart. The problem is, doesn't matter how smart we are, we can never be sure we got it right until you get a real reaction from the customer, right? Yeah. And not only that, Michael just pointed out, right? There's so many of them, especially for Verizon, such a huge brand, right? We're practically selling to everyone. It's a huge mass market we're dealing with. I mean, it would be foolish of us to assume there's one solution works the best for everyone. It's impossible. We probably need a set of top performers to service a set of top, I call them, customer clusters, right? They're not quite segments yet, right? But if you're really able to push yourself to operate there, you will realize how you are reacting, how you're connecting with market is transformed. And that's where you start to see results.
Yeah, and the market's also not static. So every day things change, competitive space change, customer expectations change. So that's a journey that never stops. That need to kind of change and meet customer needs is something you have to think about every day.
It's hard though. It's hard, right? Sorry, Milton, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ning, especially now, right? Because now kind of experimentation, everybody's like accelerated their digital roadmaps. They're quickly having to adapt. I mean, curbside pickup, we're going to talk a little bit about that later, but there have been a number of retailers that have had curbside pickup on their roadmap for 2 to 3 years out, and all of a sudden it was up in 2 to 3 weeks, right? So being able to be nimble in this environment and react is key, and it's the balance between, to your point, about the testing strategy as well as reacting quickly, because the market is just, it has accelerated 3 to 5 years in the last 3 months. So
yeah, actually, one of my favorite pundits to listen to is Professor Scott Galloway, and his latest is imagine the world as you think it would be 10 years from now, and then realize that it's here today? You know, what would you have done differently a couple of months ago if you thought you were going to leap forward 10 years in your operations, and how would your business be different?
Right.
And
I wanted to add to that, right? I think it's not intuitive, right? Why? Because all of us, they include me, right? May not include Michael and Milton, but definitely includes me. We grew up in this culture and in this long industrial history, right? It's all about pre-planning, about sort it out and figure it out in a very linear way of operating. Out of nowhere, you know, we understand the emotion, we understand this digital potential, we understand collaboration, we understand experimentation, but every day though, I feel like it's like a fighting the old habit kind of thing, right? Individually, and then as an organization, is how do you truly operate from the point where you start with experimentation versus start with what you believe is right?
Yeah.
That is a huge difference. I think that is a true, frankly, challenge, right? I would say for leaders everywhere, and today and tomorrow, it will go on for a while. Because I think that is, you know, think about it, because of decades, even 100 years behind of us, that's how we operated. It's going to take some time, right, to change.
Yeah, it's hard to break both momentum, which clearly all big companies have, and it's also hard to acknowledge that what worked and what you know is not relevant today, and you have to be open to new ideas. So that's maybe a great lead into, you know, thinking about personalization. So you talked about segmentationing and clusters. And Milton, maybe, you know, you could share with us a little bit of, you know, how you think about customization for customers and personalization, you know, online versus offline, and what does personalization really mean, and what's really possible and relevant?
So, you know, I would say, given the current environment and kind of the evolution of where we're going now from a digital retail perspective, personalization is probably more important now than it's ever been. I mean, it's always been very important in my view, but I think everyone now is quickly realizing that they're going to need to accelerate those efforts. And to your point about, Michael, what is personalization, right? So historically, you know, if I've gone to my local butcher or my dry cleaner, my hardware store, they knew that I came in on Friday to get whatever, steak for the weekend, et cetera. Milton, good to see you. So it's almost now that I almost pretty much expect something similar online. You know, not to the point where, and there's a balance, right? There's a balance between really good personalization and then at different levels of personalization. Like some websites, it's Hello Milton, and that's the extent of it, right? Others really like what we used to do when I was at Hudson's Bay. Gilt was one of the businesses that we owned. They had a totally personalized homepage, right? So if I buy men's and Ning is buying women's, and then her homepage is going to be tailored to the brands that she likes, versus mine, it's going to be men's and the brands I like. So personalization can mean really taking over your homepage and every page of your site to really make it targeted. You know, another example of personalization could be in emails, for example. Okay, on Saks, we had a very robust data layer on our website that we knew when you put something in your cart, when you abandoned cart, what you viewed. And when we sent out our marketing messages, we would integrate those personalized touch points in the emails, because we knew that it drove a lot more engagement, a lot more traffic, better conversion, and a better experience. Now, you got to be careful with it, right? Because if it's bad, it's super annoying as a consumer, right? I mean, how many times have you bought something and then you get retargeted, or you get an email for something that you just bought and you're like, geez, you know, I just bought that a couple hours ago, right? So you really want to ensure that you're connecting the dots. And there's obviously, getting back to our initial point about, there's lots of technology out there that can help connect the dots. But you know, again, one of those challenges is data is in silos, like organizations have been in silos. So how do you kind of break those barriers from a technology standpoint and make sure that you've mapped out Milton's customer journey and you're acknowledging at each point in the journey, I'm a rewards customer, welcome back, you bought this last time, so I think you may like this, et cetera.
Yeah, I really appreciate, you know, Milton made the effort to talk, we got to be careful, right? Because I think this is where I start to think about, you know, can we further define personalization, right? And first of all, Milton also said it, right? More than ever, personalization is more important. You have to accelerate it, right? But what does it mean? Sort of think about it. How do I peel the onion? How do I kind of make, that more focused, right? Because it's a very big umbrella. How do I focus my team? One of the things I thought about is maybe instead of thinking about targeting people, right, think about how we can be more relevant.
Yeah.
I think in those words, sometimes it feels like it matters, because if we, use certain words, the workforce, the teams tend to think certain things, right? Tend to take certain actions. I have to think about maybe it's not about targeting. Maybe it's about, and I'll talk about it a bit why, right? It's not just the fact relevant. I think it's about how do you make it relevant? Could be relevant to this person, could be relevant to a group of people, could be relevant at the right time, could be relevant to the moment, but in the behavior, right? They're thinking about different things. So I think that's a big keyword for me, right? The second reason is I would say, personalization has, huge implications to operations. The way we have been doing it, right, in the past, there's a lot of effort looking into segmentation, understanding who they are, demographics, put them into different groups, think about what we can target them. Again, I think the keyword there is a little bit more about targeting, right? And, Milton knows this, Michael knows this, right? I mean, the operation behind it, right, for a large company is enormous, right? And I had a huge fear when I started to think about that. I'm thinking, oh, Lord, if I just fast forward, right, how big operation burden I'm creating here, right? How many people I have to ask for? How many more buildings I have to, get my team into, right? I mean, it started to feel like a little bit, I became a little bit fearful, right? Am I on the right path? So then I started to say same thing, right? When you feel like you're hitting something, feels like maybe, right, I'm not on the right path here, right? Maybe I need to change how I think, change the lens, how I use to look into the work, right? Take a moment, think about what's really available out there, trying to find how these two can meet, right? One thing I realized is, again, I'm a huge fan of technology, right? Technology has evolved. Our ability to be able to understand what the person needs in real time has really completely been transformed, right? Big data was a big keyword a few years ago, and this point is no longer about big data. It's about using the data. We actually know how to use it. Yeah. So if I know what they need right now, honestly, why am I spending all my time planning for it, right? So that's the first thing I thought about. Is it really the right path to start to, have all kinds of rules predefined, all kinds of operation, a big team behind it? I sort of wonder maybe that's not necessarily the only way we should be doing this, right? So real time is a big keyword for me, right? So relevancy and real time. The last keyword here really is, I would say, this whole idea, I'll use the word dynamic, right? The traditional personalization is if and then statements, right? If you in this segment, see this ad, do this. If you're in a different segment, see this, do this, right? There's a lot of those. Because AI, because technology, right? Could we feel comfortable not knowing that? Could we feel comfortable to allow the technology to find what is needed, group them, cluster them, right? I avoid the word segmentation because it implies I have to do that beforehand. I start using the word cluster, right? Can we allow technology to find the clusters really hungry for something? And can we adjust the message and products and campaigns towards that, right? Can we turn some of this personalization effort into a dynamic experience effort instead? And then I started to realize, wow, if that's doable, right? What's the role of all the personalization I've been doing? I feel like it's very complementary. I feel like for every organization, right, you will have high value segments. You have to plan for it. You have to go for it. Why not? You know exactly what they want. Go for it. I would say on top of that, right, think about how you can introduce a dynamic experience using technology. Don't worry about segmentation. Don't worry about exactly what's being seen. Let the tech work. And together, I think you get more. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think those last two ones, relevancy and dynamic, really to me kind of, scream context and understanding the customer needs at a point in time. One of the problems I've always had with how people have implemented personalization is it doesn't understand what I'm doing or what I'm trying to do. It understands what I used to do or what I did last time I was on the website. So it doesn't know if I'm researching to go make an in-store purchase or if I'm shopping for my kid versus myself or for work versus home. And you get kind of trapped into these PII-oriented approaches to personalization that kind of know some data about you, but they don't understand what you're trying to accomplish. And I think figuring that one out is really key. And, you know, getting to your point, Ning, of understanding relevancy in real time is the only way personalization really starts to add tremendous value for customers. So it's a complex topic. And I think the other thing you said that resonated with me a lot was, and this goes back a long time, we've never had a lack of data at retail. We've had a lack of insight and recommendations on what to do with the knowledge. Nobody's looking for more reports. We're all looking for direction and, you know, outcomes, and figuring out how do we turn that data into business objectives and outcomes.
And I think, Michael, all that data caused some paralysis too, because it's this data here, where do I start, right?
Yeah, you could just overanalyze yourself to death and you'll never find the right answer. You'll always find, yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, for everyone listening, right, I cannot see you, but I'm looking for AI real-time insights tool, meaning no longer happy about having reports, no longer happy about seeing trends, no longer happy about seeing decks summarizing the trends, right? Can I give my team something so in real time they're seeing the most important thing, right? I think it's possible. I think if you marry AI with all the things we just talked about, it's entirely possible. So if you're working on that, let me know. I'm looking for one.
Yeah,
Sorry, Michael, using your forum.
No, that's a great question. So, you know, how can you take your company to be more real-time customer-centric? You know, what are some of the things that you're doing at Verizon to take all of that feedback that you're getting constantly from, you know, millions of customers and incorporating it into how you guys operate, how you think about the user experience?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So what kind of data and metrics do you see being useful in that journey? Obviously, there's, you know, a need for more tools and new insights, but, you know, what kind of information is helpful in you understanding the customer journey, and, you know, what real-time feedback is coming at you?
That's a great question. I think it's, I have to be honest with you, I don't think I've really thought through it, right? So just a couple of things, you know, bubbled in my head. I think the number one is, I realize is there are boundless amount of insights you can lean into to satisfy your customer. So I almost start to feel like, well, I'm not sure it's a good idea, right, for me to have a journey view or funnel view all the time. I'm not sure it's a good idea for me to know the top performing pages, top traffic pages anymore. That's why it became so interesting, AI, you know, AI driven, right, real-time insights. Like it just gotta be a way to understand among all the data we collect, all the insights we have, right? What are the most important touch points? What are the most important moments, right? So it's a time and a place, right? That where we can do more, we can make the customer happier, we can expand our ability to sell more, right? Without getting into their face, right? How do we get that? And I started thinking, I think it feels like it's more place and time versus journey and page or whatever, right? It's not easy because, you know, this is where you kind of touch into the whole Omni thing, right? Digital is just one of the channels. And today, if you think about, I think I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, right? You think about how people behave, it's really not about the website, not about an app anymore, right? So how do you get that? I'm pretty sure, you know, given the tools and technology we have, we should be able to do that. So today, right, because I don't have a ready to go tool, like you said, you know, give it to my team to look at in real time themselves, right? We do go through those exercises here internally. It's a combination of performance analytics, behavior analytics, among other things, voice of customer, and real-time qualitative, you know, tools we use to understand what's happening in real time, right? To figure out what we want to focus on. So that's what we do today.
That's great. Milton, anything to add to that?
So, I mean, I first of all, I agree with everything Ning said. I think the point of kind of the funnel view is a really great one in terms of that's not like the full story, right? It doesn't really, I mean, I've looked at so many Omnichannel reports, Google Analytics reports, et cetera, in my lifetime, really trying to understand, okay, so why is my bounce rate higher on this page? You know, what are the key metrics here? You know, growing up in sort of the direct response industry, everything was about sort of the health of your customer file. We really looked at the customer file. It was like one of the most important kind of Monday reports that we would get, right? Everybody in retail gets their sales reports for the, you know, the prior week, but customer data, customer file, the health of your customer, So really understanding, is your customer file growing? Are customers coming back? How many new customers are you feeding in? But then I think all the data that, you know, Ning pointed to or referenced, there's definitely ways to also get, there's other, you know, some organizations are really focused on Net Promoter Score. They use that as a key metric in the organization to say customer satisfaction, am I moving the needle? Looking at it on a store basis. You know, I think it's important to kind of, getting back to the earlier point, understanding what data is relevant, what am I going to be able to affect, agreeing on what data I'm going to use, and then being able to make something that's actionable, right? At the end of the day, it has to be actionable. If you're improving customer satisfaction, you got to keep doing what you're doing. If it's going the other way, you got to be able to pivot, make adjustments. So that's really important for me.
That's great. And, you know, one of the things I've always thought that the most important way to incorporate and understand customer feedback is to actually just go out and talk and listen to customers. And, you know, sometimes we get so wrapped up in the tools and the data that we forget to do the simplest things. And, you know, we're talking about digital today, but spending time in stores and observing customer behavior or talking to customers, or from the corporate office, listening in on call center calls, reading customer reviews that they send in, reading product reviews. There's an amazing amount of insight you can gather just by listening to the customer. And that applies also to B2B companies. You know, talk to your customers, you know, see what they're saying, what they understand, what are their pain points, and how can you go back and address those.
Yeah, and it also goes back to what Michael said earlier, right? It changes all the time. I mean, frankly, that's really so contradicts with the whole notion of the data operation, right? It's all based on past data, you know what I'm saying? You know, the thing is that you can find the best solution, you can have the best insights, but in the next second, you know, your competitor changed something, somebody else changed something, and instantly the user behavior is changing, right? It is a very flat and wildly dynamic world all companies are competing in these days. It's really important for us to have that in mind as we try to contemplate, right, future strategies.
Absolutely. So we're in a really interesting time, obviously, due to COVID-19 and kind of the changes we're seeing. And, you know, a number of forward-looking retailers, Milton, like the ones you've worked with, Toys R Us, Hudson's Bay, et cetera, you know, we're early on in, you know, what at the time were known as Omnichannel Programs, you know, really enabling cross-channel shopping. What are some of the things that you found through your experience that were really successful in bridging that online and offline experience from a customer perspective? And what are some of the capabilities companies had to build to be successful doing that?
So that's a great question, Michael. You know, to your point, there were some, and we worked together at Toys R Us, and there were some really great omni-channel programs that we had there, like buy online, pick up in store, ship from store, ship to store. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to inventory accessibility and how good is your data with regards to inventory visibility, right? So the key, and if you look at organizations today like Target, okay, Walmart, et cetera, that have really invested in inventory, visibility, distribution, et cetera, they're really winning in this environment right now, right? Because the key is, do I have visibility to where that product is anywhere in my store network, in my distribution center, and really being able to identify on the website for the customer that this particular, you know, iPhone, this particular widget is available at your local store. And that requires, you know, really good, clean data, good visibility, because the last thing that you want is a customer to think that, okay, in 2 hours, I'm going to go pick up this new TV and the order's canceled. It takes longer than 2 hours, et cetera. So data is important. Then really building the structure or the experience around that. What is the experience like on the website? What is the experience like in the store? What are all the communication vehicles that I'm sending to the customer? Once the customer places that order and expects to go pick it up in the store, I'm acknowledging it that the store has it. I'm acknowledging that the store has now picked it and it's waiting for you at the now it's the buy online, pick up in store station. So really, okay, how am I messaging the customer? Then customer gets to the store, that store experience, super important. You know, Best Buy, Home Depot, amazing buy online, pick up in store experiences. Those are just two of my favorites, but it's really important. And, you know, at Toys R Us and other organizations, we tested, should we take that kiosk where the customer is, you know, where we're holding the order for him or her and actually put it in the back of the store so that we can have the customer walk through the aisle and buy something else while he or she is there. And we quickly found that, that was not a great experience. They were kind of annoyed, right? They wanted to just get there, buy the item. Although we knew that 30% of the time they bought something else while they were in the store also, right? So inventory visibility, focusing on the customer experience, and then most importantly, the stores really doing their part in the back end when the customer gets to the store in terms of what that experience is like.
Yeah, that's so insightful, Milton. And I think it's you're doing experimentation, right? You try something, you're like, oh, I'm not sure I will do that again, right? I love all of that. And I think just to add to what you're saying, what I'm observing, this is probably a little bit more so I do user experience for the longest as my career, right? So from that perspective, wear that hat, right? I think the customer expectation is so high these days. People don't want to say that, but it's very true, right? I think the instant gratification is almost, in the root of every psyche these days. It's because social media, because internet, right? I think if you think through a normal human being, what they expect these days, it definitely is not, it's really not easy to meet, right? They're constantly on the phone. They learned about something. They want to get it right there. They want to have the shortest, just 1 or 2 clicks so they can order it. Mm-hmm. If it's not shipped to their house within an hour, because Amazon made that happen, right? They're the troublemaker, right? That's expectation. I should get this right now. If I can't get it, I should hop into my car, get in the store. When I get to the store, though, I better walk in. There better be a person smiling, have my bag in the hand, and bow to me to say, hi, welcome back, and please, here's what you just ordered. I mean, that's really what they want, right? So what does it mean? It's a huge challenge for professionals like Milton and me and Michael, right? Is how do we meet that demand? How do we provide the satisfaction, right? No longer just digital, but it's from the home to the phone to the car. Car is a device. Car is connected, right? To the store, back on the phone, back in the car, back in the house, right? You really have to think through that. The Omni is it's no longer a buzzword. It's such a huge thing, huge deal. How do you do that? I think it's truly challenging and truly difficult to meet. I think it challenges, as much as there's a lot of buzz out there talking about how retail is being challenged, the stores are having troubles and all that. I think all of that speaks in volume how we're yet to meet the market demand. It requires to change, requires to think differently, because the market is still there, hasn't gone away. They're still buying stuff. They're just not buying the way we want them to buy anymore.
Yeah, and I think, you kind of look back at the history of, multi-channel, omni-channel, kind of 10 years up until the last, 6 months or so, there was a lot of change, and it felt like a pretty fast pace of change with in-store pickup and ship from store. And then you look at what's happened in the last 3 months, and virtually every retailer, every restaurant, every grocery store has had to figure out how to do contactless pickup, curbside delivery. It's just been amazing to see how retailers have really innovated in real time to meet changing customer needs based on safety. And I think that's shown us that, if you put your mind to it, there's a lot we can accomplish really quickly by focusing on the needs of the customer. So
exactly.
It's been exciting to see. So let's talk about a different topic. Let's talk about, how do you champion innovation in a company like Verizon? What kinds of behaviors and mindsets, Ning, are you trying to instill in your team and hopefully bleed out into the broader organization? So you've clearly had a lot of success changing how you think about leaping forward really quickly. I'd love to know, how you're expanding that and, what are you trying to do more broadly?
Yeah, I think, working in Verizon the last 2 years has been nothing but a very humbling experience, right? And I used to joke about it and say, whatever worked elsewhere doesn't work here. Why? It's because we're smart, we're very successful, we have tons of potential, and most importantly, we're just huge.
Yeah.
Verizon is a monster machine. It's massive, right? And it really challenges you to rethink what works. And at the beginning of it, I thought it's a little bit more about organization structure, right? And back to, Michael was saying earlier, right? Maybe if we rework, this will work, right? And then I realized not really. It's about leadership. It's about culture. It's about talent, right? It's about the end goal, the end game. And then after that, I was thinking about, okay, if that's the case, if we do that, we'll be the okay. I think very quickly I realized and connect that with Mike was asking, right? Innovation, right? I think one of the first thing came to my mind is this need to connect leaders with the market constantly, right? Constantly. They're super smart, but they're super busy, right? They don't have the minute in the day to know what's happening out there. But if you don't consistently and continuously and persistently inspire them, right? How do we expect them to lead 100,000 employee companies to move forward, to be the digital leader? It's impossible. And we're not talking about 2 leaders. We're talking about hundreds of leaders, right? How do we make an effort to making sure all our leaders are connected in the with the market? Really be aware what the latest development, what's happening, and have the moment to think about how do I relate to that? How does it relate to my business? How does it relate to my team? I think that is something I would say probably, right? It's a common theme. I would say not invest enough across many, many companies, right? We're doing a huge push here. I think a training and the leadership, it's like, I think the amount of effort Verizon put in to focus on training, to focus on leadership, it's enormous and it's impressive. I think that's one of the reasons, right? One of the many reasons Verizon continue to be the leader, continue to be successful after decades, right? And the top of the market. Yeah. So that's one. So that's why I'm here, right? I feel the need for myself isn't just for my peer teams, for others, it's for myself. I want to be connected. I wanted to know, to learn from everybody else, to be inspired. The second angle of this really is about, the team, right? So between, the end of the day, the people make the company, right? So if we talked about the leaders, now let's talk about the team, everyone behind them, right? How do we do that? How do we, in a large company like this, right, chain of command is critically important. We literally can't survive if we don't have a clear chain of command. We're simply too big army, right? But the unfortunate of that, if you're not careful, right, it can easily turn into a workforce just follows orders. That is the opposite of what we want if we want to be successful digitally. Remember we said earlier, digital is always changing. The next second is different. As we speak, there's more things invented, right? So how do you do that? How do you allow a workforce to be able to function well in a chain of command structure while still inspired, empowered, enabled to want to create, right? And what I'm trying is trying to create, change the tone of all the day-to-day meetings. We have a lot of meetings. We're on calls all the time, 24/7, right? I'm trying to see if there's a way to change all the meetings to be meetings for creators versus meetings for order takers. I think something to do with how you organize those meetings, how you find facilitators, and how do you give them marching orders, right? If all the team sessions, more and more of them, it's about we are creators here. We're here to create something. And then the conversation is different. And then what they do is different. How they relate to each other is different. For otherwise, right, I think it's pretty dangerous. You get on the call and many, many calls. It's all about tell me, should I move to the left 2 inches or to the right? And let's do it. And that's the end of the day. We don't want that, right? So, I mean, will that solve it? I'm not sure. But I think, if we advocate for that at every level, right, the notion of we're all creators, we're collaborators, I think over time you will see difference.
I love that idea of creators versus order takers. I might steal that. Great. So we're coming up on the end of the hour. So I thought maybe we could just pivot to a few Q&A things that came through while we were on the line here. So Milton, you mentioned sharing metrics as a starting point for organizations that are not digital first. How do I bring teams together to start this conversation and ultimately agree on a starting metric?
So I think first of all, Michael, at the end of the day, it really comes down to kind of having common goals first, right? So if the overall, what are the most important metrics that are driving the business? Okay, everybody wants to generate more sales. They want to improve profitability. They want to grow their business, et cetera, depending upon where what their goal is. Startup, they're in customer acquisition mode, they're growing, et cetera. So I think the first thing is, what are the common top 3 to 5 metrics that as an organization that I am holding my people accountable for, that are super important every Monday morning, that, the CEO is getting data on. And then I think it's really then breaking it down within each kind of part of the organization, whether it's, so if it's digital, if it's e-commerce, kind of, what are they doing? What are we doing to be able to drive total enterprise sales? What are we doing to be able to drive e-commerce sales? So I think it really comes down to, again, having common goals, and then the metrics that we, team members, organizations are accountable for to drive those those overall common goals.
That's great. Thanks, Milton. Ning, this question came in, and perhaps you can share your experience. And this is not an internal question. I didn't write this one. But how has Evolv helped you gain valuable insights and prioritize your initiatives for Verizon Wireless customers?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I would say, Evolv has been an incredible partner, right? We have, more than one or two partners, but, Evolv is one of the key partners we have for this practice, and really appreciate not just the tools they bring to the table, the insights they bring to the table, and how they work with us. I think they very much treat themselves as a part of my team, which I really, really appreciate, right? There's not a, Evolv versus Verizon, right? Ning versus Michael, right? We're just part of one team. I think that's the beginning of a great partnership. Specifically insights they bring to the table, right? They obviously have tons of experience in terms of how to do this type of thing well, right? Not a simple A/B test, but A/B test on steroids. They've seen how this plays out with other clients, right? Without disclose anyone's confidential information, right? They ask us good questions. They ask us to think about how to design different test scenarios and, iterations differently. They challenge us. And I think that allowed us to be able to not only use the tool, not only be able to, I would say, follow our direction, our strategy, right, but be effective as an expert, rightfully so, right, advisor into how we plan and how we operate. Lastly, I want to point it out is I think their ability, right, to, I would say, be in the trenches and work with us, work through issues, right? Anything, in the company this size is hard. Anything. There's nothing easy about it. It takes perseverance. It takes the willingness to believe what you believe and do what you think is right, but come back tomorrow, come back the day after, come back the day after, right? Keep at it, keep doing it. And through all of it, right, keep that attitude of bring the best to the customer and bring the best to Verizon. I think, that's really, and also they also deep in data, and they, have access to our reports and data. I think they're constantly coming back with good ideas. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks. That was great. And we love working with your team as well. Here's another one. How do you measure the return on investment on your optimization program, broadly speaking? And then what have the returns been? Not Evolv specific, but more broadly on the overall optimization program.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I would prefer we talk like not in the public forum. I think some of this, how we do it, I probably won't be able to disclose to you. But what I can guarantee you is we made a huge effort to figure out how do we quantify the impact of optimization. And not only that, right, we have specific goals for the optimization team, which is not common. Most optimization team elsewhere just need to learn, need to do more tests. No, we have hard targets to hit with speed, with quarterly targets. What we do is we figure out the methodology, we aligned with the overall financial reporting for digital sales. We aligned with digital sales leaders, and we track, we report every single month. And the impact is tremendous. And our team went from nothing to, I would say, one of the key drivers for digital growth in Verizon. I'm very proud of it. And I'm happy, you having my information. I'm happy to have more, chat on the side. I think measuring, quantify the success of optimization is not a mature field. You talk to different companies that have different ways of doing it. I think more people talk about it, more people share how they do this, I think we get better together.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, just for a small pitch for Evolv, that is one of the fundamental differences in terms of how we view ourselves. We're not here to help you get learnings. We're here to help you drive business results. And we think that pivot from, what a traditional testing program looks like to an optimization program really focused on customer results is kind of the key. So thank you both. It was a great conversation. Great to talk to you both. Ning, thanks for your time. And Milton, thank you as well.
Thank you.
And as a follow-up, if there's any questions that didn't get covered, please let us know in the chat and we will follow up with Ning or Milton and get back to you.
Thanks, everyone. Glad to be here.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.